Hi all, and this is the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. Apologies for the late start. You will not be disappointed. So what's today's date? April the 2nd. Enjoy the show. It's going to tip some heads, it's going to boom, and it's going to be a shot around the world. All in one shot. Hi all and welcome to the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. We've got quite a show for you tonight. Apologies for the late start. New information was coming in and I had to change the original show. Right, let's get into it. We'll have another music break shortly. I've kind of just rushed right into it. But this host in particular and this show has an awful lot of detractors, even when we've shown many proofs. But we have the likes of the Shanes, the Team Bubbers, Randy Morgans and various others who wish to discredit us all, and yet they all make statements, we're scammers and Kim's this and Kim's that, and yet conveniently at every point leave out any proof of their claims, which is exactly the same as the mainstream media, which was highlighted in Monday's show. It's the same thing. They all spit out scripts, all make statements, and yet remain unchallenged of providing proof to back their claims. They have none. Now, one radio show host this week described our show as 3 hours of steamy, rehashed dog shit. They doth protest and envy too much, methinks. And this show in particular will provide more clarity and further proofs to back it up. So what have we got going on? Well, the coronavirus. But why are the hospitals empty? Why is heart disease being posted as a coronavirus death? Where is their proof of their claims of deaths? Hundreds in New York, they say. Hundreds in California. Again, no evidence. But is it a coincidence of false reporting of deaths in those two states? No. Why? Because they will request more funding is why. And those two states are the pinnacle of greed-based money harvesters in this country. Monday's show. Did that show reduce you or inspire you? It's all of how you perceive it and how you are thinking and operating that decides that path. Did it have sad messages and not what you want to hear? Yes, it did. But few of them you didn't already know. Did it overwhelm you or lack of support? Why? It's always been the case. Does the alt media being corrupt disturb you? Again, why? I told you all back this in 2016 it was, and so that hasn't changed either. And yet despite all that, we've still achieved so much and proven we didn't really need their help, and this show will show you why. And I've said all along, we save us, and that will never change. Along the way, we'll pick up stragglers, fence sitters, sleepers, and minions, I might add, to our cause. Why? Because they will have no other option. And April could well be explosive in more ways than one. I detect quite a disappointment amongst many of you in regards to Mr. Trump and Q of links to BlackRock and taking over the Federal Reserve, with the obvious links to the Black Sun elements, which will be shown as proof further on in the show. And even Anna von Reitz called that out as well. But a few things come from this, is people will ask, does Trump know about the Black Sun? The answer is yes, and we've made him aware of those facts. But he is in a difficult position. Is Trump aware that the Federal Reserve is defunct? It has no license and hasn't had since 2012 and can't print dollars. Yes, again, we have made him aware and also shown the proof and the papers proving it to him. People will ask, have I changed my stance on Trump? And I will say what I've said previously in many shows, that I will support Trump or anyone operating for and by the people. And I have repeated that consistently. Me personally, that's me, I don't care much for politicians. The majority of them are self-serving greed merchants who over time have done little to nothing to aid or support the people they're supposed to represent. Personalities don't appeal to me either. I don't care what fake label you have or how perceived higher rank you have. If you are not for and by the people, I will call it out. I remember saying in one show, if they replaced Trump with George Bush Jr. and he was following to the letter the changes to be made for and by the people, I would support him. Personalities and titles don't count. Actions do. Remember the event piece I did a year or so ago? And there have been many events added to that list since, so it's likely over 40 now. Not one of those events were achieved with Trump, Q, or any other government. We did that ourselves. And with our expanding group now generating massive interest globally, with talk this week of adding over 100,000 members to the group from countries afar, that we is now sharing the load a bit into the public arena of what was largely a hidden war. It's not no more. Trump spoke recently of fighting a hidden war and hidden people. Well, we have been doing the bulk of that with many others long before Trump even came into office. All done by ordinary people. And if they wish to join us, fine. If they don't, fine also. As we have proven, we don't need them. And it's only a matter of time before they all fall. Hi all and welcome back. Right, fairly hefty opening. This next part is more mellow. And then the remaining part, once we get into the intel and the op-eds, are going to be explosive. I can promise you that. Right. Some background news. 4 US senators are under scrutiny for claims they used insider knowledge about the impending coronavirus crisis to sell shares before the prices plummeted. Republicans Rick Bear and Kelly Loeffler face calls to quit after selling millions in stocks last month. James Inhofe, a Republican, and predictably Dianne Feinstein, a Democrat, also reportedly sold holdings at the same time. Now, it's illegal for Congress members to trade based on non-public information gathered during their official duties. And more predictably, all 4 senators deny any wrongdoing, which is a common theme amongst their people, as you know. And Mr. Bear of North Carolina reportedly dumped up to $1.7 million of stocks last month. Mrs. Loeffler of Georgia is reported to have sold holdings up to $3 million in a series of transactions beginning the same day as a Senate briefing on the virus. Mr. Bear, who is the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, has also come under fire after US outlet NPR obtained a recording of him warning a group of wealthy constituents last month about the dire economic impact of the coronavirus at a time when the Trump administration was publicly downplaying the threat. And he also told the group to curtail their travel. No surprise. Remember all the stock selling before 9/11? Perhaps we'll find a link to that later on in the show. Now, the impact of this coronavirus is the people who understand it for what it is, and the people who, like bots, just follow everything, like go and buy toilet paper. And let's wear scary masks in supermarkets, etc. Bot people. And we'll have more on them later as well. So here's what happened at Amazon. No surprise. These designed for lead takeover when everything else is gone. Chris Smalls lost his job on Monday after helping lead a protest of what some workers claim is the company's lack of precautions against the virus. Amazon has confirmed one positive case of COVID-19 at the facility, and Monday's walkout at Amazon, workers claimed there were 10 cases and chanted shut it down in a call for the building to be closed and sanitised. Workers alleged they lacked face masks and that cleaning supplies needed to clean the building were scarce. Less than 2 hours after the protest, Smalls got a phone call telling him that he was fired, and it was a targeted retaliation, Smalls told CBS. Amazon said in a statement that Smalls was fired for multiple safety issues, and he had received multiple warnings for violating social distancing guidelines and putting the safety of others at risk, according to the company statement. This next piece is the same. On the one hand, they want you to fear and panic and let's all have masks and hand sanitizer and social distancing, and on the other hand, there's no protection being afforded to the staff that are being told that they have to continue working whilst the bulk of the country is told you're not working. All very fascist, that, if you ask me. So hospitals are threatening to fire healthcare workers who publicise their working conditions during the coronavirus pandemic, or is it dem panic? And in some cases followed through. Ming Lin, an emergency room physician in Washington State, said she was told on Friday, or he was told, he was out of a job because he'd given an interview to a newspaper about a Facebook post detailing what he believed to be inadequate protective equipment and also testing. Those test kits don't work. They provide 80% positive. Fake. And in Chicago, a nurse was fired after emailing colleagues that she wanted to wear a more protective mask whilst on duty. In New York, the NYU Langone health system has warned employees they could be terminated if they talk to the media without authorization. Zeke Heil. And hospitals are muzzling nurses and other healthcare workers in an attempt to preserve their image, said Ruth Schubert, who's a spokesman for the Washington State Nurses Association. It is outrageous, she said, but hospitals have traditionally had strict media guidelines to protect patient privacy. That's about as relevant as the National Security Act. Urging staff to talk with journalists only through official public relations officers. Really. But the pandemic has ushered in a new era, Schubert said, and healthcare workers must have the ability to tell the public what is really going on inside the facilities where they are caring for COVID-19 patients, she said. And there you have it. Like I said, it's thinly disguised fascism. Alex Salmond, Scotland, has been cleared of sexually assaulting 9 women whilst he was Scotland's First Minister. A jury found the former SNP leader not guilty on 12 of the sexual charges facing him, while another was found not proven. A further charge of sexually assaulting a 10th woman had previously been dropped by prosecutors. Now, Mr. Salmond said he was innocent of all the charges against him throughout the 2-week trial, but the women who made the allegations included an SNP politician, a party worker, and several current and former Scottish Government civil servants and also officials. That tells you right there and then there's certain levels and there's other levels. And during his evidence to the court, he said the claims made about his alleged conduct were deliberate fabrications for a political purpose or just plain exaggerations. So that's the news story. Why would 12 plus 1 women come forward and accuse them of the same thing, and yet all of them found to be lying? Well, this goes back to 1996, believe it or not, and this is a typical cover-up by Scottish MPs and the Scottish legal system backed by Whitehall and the Parliament, who were all responsible for the Dunblane school massacre in 1996, because some of the children in that school began to talk of the sexual abuse by well-known Scottish politicians that were the backbone of the Tony Blair government at the time. You all know their names, or certainly the people in the UK will know the names. Salmond being one of them, Brown being another. And they hired a patsy, Thomas Hamilton, to kill 16 children and then launch one child who survived that school shooting disaster into a global superstar in the field of tennis. That child was Andy Murray. These people don't reach the top by accident. And this has been another example of it being covered up by Scotland Yard when they could have prevented that event, and all the other people like Jimmy Savile and all his cohorts. But their investigation at the time in the 90s all led back to the Royals. And so they deleted the files and the investigation. But time always tells, doesn't it? The Trump administration unsealed criminal charges Thursday against senior officials of the government of Venezuela, including President Nicolas Maduro, accusing them of taking a leading role in the country's illegal drug trafficking. We'll have more on that later. Maduro helped manage and ultimately lead a criminal organization known as the Cartel of the Suns. Dear, it's all coming out now. According to an indictment that was made public on Thursday, Under his leadership, the cartel sought not only to enrich its members and enhance their power, but also flood the United States with cocaine and inflict the drug's harmful and addictive effects on users in this country, which was all run by the CIA. And we'll have more on that later also. An indictment filed in federal court in Manhattan, no surprise, said Maduro and other cartel members prioritized using cocaine as a weapon against America and importing as much cocaine as possible into the United States. The charges marked a new low in relations with Venezuela, which have been deteriorating since 1999, when Hugo Chavez, Maduro's predecessor, became president. He villainized the US and other countries he accused of taking advantage of Venezuela because of the oil, and the US and Maduro have long been at odds over the country's extensive corruption, and the Trump administration backed the leader of the opposition, Juan Guaido, instead of Maduro. And the United States is among more than 50 countries who have refused to recognize Maduro as the head of state. Final news item before we go into the sub-intel and a music break. And it's a good news story. And rather familiar with me. And it's a further example of my hometown club that I support. Perhaps too much at times in my life, but that's the way it is. But Everton Football Club in the UK and its official charity, Everton in the Community, launched last week what is known as the Blue Family, Everton playing blue, and is a coordinated outreach and engagement campaign to maintain contact with the supporters and also provide vital support and assistance to some of the most vulnerable, socially isolated and at-risk members of the community in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic. The Blue Family campaign will maintain and extend the reach of the club and the charity following the closure of all club sites, the suspension of football fixtures, or soccer fixtures for American listeners, and also the postponement of most community programme deliveries. Now, the club provided £50,000, which is about $70,000, to fund the launch and initial activities, and will be relocating club and community staff to ensure the effective delivery of this campaign. And it said that Evertonians across the world are together during this difficult time, and that's why the club has launched its Blue Family campaign on top of its Care in the Community programme to bring the fan base and the community together and to help the most needy and also the most vulnerable members of society. Now, this outreach activity includes fans and members of the community in greatest need contacted by Everton in the Community staff to deliver tailored and focused support, assistance and guidance, including essential food parcels distribution, including breakfast packs for young children, financial assistance for prescription purchases and delivery, mobile phone credit for those living alone and with limited support networks, support with gas and or electricity vouchers for those facing increased fuel bills, mental health support and advice, a referral service for access to Everton in the Community support provision, calls from the Everton Fan Centre to thousands of fans to maintain contact and provide a friendly voice to talk to, prioritising the elderly and also the isolated. Increased communication through the club's email, social media and web platforms to share important public information and deliver engaging contact for those in isolation. exercise and mindfulness videos provided by trained staff from the club and Everton in the community. The fresh food that was intended for the players and the staff at Everton at their training headquarters, Finch Farm, was all donated to the North Liverpool Food Bank on Friday. Everton and its official charity Everton in the Community launched the Blue Family campaign, and it will be assisting some of the city's most vulnerable community members following the outbreak. And the produce that was collected from the training facility was delivered to the food bank, where it will be packaged into essential food parcels ready for distribution to those in need across the north of Liverpool. And throughout the day, the club's fan services team continued to call vulnerable, isolated and at-risk people across Merseyside to ensure the Blue Family initiative continued to support those in need. So that's what the club are doing. The charity's neighbourhood team has continued to work to support more than 10,000 residents in the area that live within the immediate vicinity of Goodison Park, and is running a phone, text and email service for any local resident that requires advice or support relating to matters such as housing, benefits and general well-being. All great stuff. And that is why that particular club is nicknamed the People's Club. They do a lot for the community, whilst the more richer and media-based darlings less than a mile away give little to nothing back to their community or fan base. And they're not just rivalry-based words either. The opinion gathered to support that statement came from several charities within the region, all stating the same thing. They give you nothing, but Everton are always willing to help, support and give. And I'm pleased that I could put that in a show. It's some of the positive aspects that the People's Club that we have are being administered within the community. It's the same up in Scotland. I can't remember the name, Love Is or something like that. They're doing the same thing, backed by THI Scotland. So it's not all negative stuff we report. Sub-Intel, the right-wing Israeli Likud party headed by the current crimes minister, rather than prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, proposed on Wednesday a bill calling for executing Palestinian political prisoners. Sieg Heil again. Nazis. National Zionism. NAZI. And reporting Miki Zohar, the head of the Likud faction in the Knesset, the Israeli newspaper Israel Hayom said that the party also proposed another bill to annex the Jordan Valley, the northern Dead Sea and the desert of Al-Khalali, Hebron, in the occupied West Bank to Israel. I told you it wouldn't stop. Warned of this years ago. And it's worth noting that Avigdor Lieberman, the head of Yisrael Beitenu, who is currently endorsing the head of Blue and White Party, Benny Gantz, for the Prime Minister's post, has called for the heads of the Palestinian prisoners to be chopped off with an axe. Lieberman has described the Palestinians inside Israel as a fifth column and calls them enemies. And he said, we will see how they will work together with those, which is the Palestinians in Israel, who work against the state. Now, back in 2017, Lieberman, who then served as Defence Minister, introduced a bill allowing the use of the death penalty against Palestinian prisoners. But that bill did not go through the Knesset. Nice people. Not. The netizens, as they're called, and experts are calling now for the US government to release information on the suspension of an infectious disease research lab under the US Army. As a petition on the White House website listed events between the closure and the outbreak of COVID-19, and have urged the US government to clarify whether the lab was related to the deadly virus. We have mentioned this place before. While the origin of the coronavirus is still unknown and conspiracy theories have caused widespread panic, experts say that timely information disclosure to the public would benefit global unity and cooperation against the pandemic, which has affected more than 150,000 people and killed 5,400 around the world as of Saturday. The Fort Detrick lab that handles high-level disease-causing material such as Ebola, which is in Frederick, Maryland, was apparently shut down after the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention issued a cease and desist order to the organization back in July 2019. And the suspension was due to multiple causes, including failure to follow local procedures and a lack of periodic recertification training for workers in the biocontainment laboratories section. The wastewater decontamination system of the lab also failed to meet standards set by the Federal Select Agent Program, and the lab, which was closed more than just under a year ago, recently caught public attention as a petition submitted to the White House on March the 10th listed some coincidences, or is it coincidences, in time between the closure and also the outbreak of COVID-19. For example, a large-scale influenza killed more than 10,000 people in the US in August 2019, which was allegedly a month after it shut down, and the COVID-19 epidemic broke out globally in February 2020 after the US organised event 201, a global pandemic exercise, hello Mr. Pompeo, in October of 2019. I'm going to repeat that again. The Fort Detrick was closed in July of 19. A large-scale influenza killed more than 10,000 people in the US in August 2019. And the COVID-19 epidemic broke out globally in February 2020 after the US organised Event 201, a global pandemic exercise, was done in October 2019. The petition also noted that many English language news reports about the closure of Fort Detrick were deleted amid the worsening COVID-19 pandemic, raising suspicions over the lab's relationship with the coronavirus. Petitioners urged the US government to publish the real reason for the lab's closure and to clarify whether the lab was related to the coronavirus and whether there was a virus leak. Not a surprise. Where are we? A couple of more to go. The Spygate scandal is shaping up to be the most significant political abuse of government power in history, and it may even be larger than people expect. There is an investigation by US Attorney John Durham into the origins of the FBI's Russian collusion investigation, or as the President Trump prefers to call it, the witch hunt continues to expand. Now, Durham reportedly opened criminal investigations last fall, and unlike the narrow Justice Department Inspector General's review of the abuse of the FISA process, Durham is now looking into the questionable activities of other government agencies, and in particular the CIA and its former director, John Brennan. The widening scope involves not only the agencies being investigated, but who was being targeted and why. And earlier last week, Cheryl Atkinson reported that based on her sources in the intelligence and law enforcement communities, the authorizations to spy on Trump functionaries such as Carter Page or former campaign manager Paul Manafort were actually pretexts for a much more expansive web of surveillance that could include anyone in contact with Page or even anyone twice removed from the ostensible target. And what happened is thousands of people could have been unknowingly caught up in the Spygate web and are still unaware that their privacy has been violated under the severely compromised FISA process. Now, Judicial Watch has chronicled how Obama, United Nations Ambassador Samantha Power, and National Security Advisor Susan Rice, amongst others, colluded in this effort to bolster the insurance policy to hobble the Trump presidency. And there's also the matter of President Obama finalizing rules in the closing days of his administration that opened the raw, unedited information feeds that were collected by the NSA, no surprise, to all of the other 16 agencies in the intelligence community before any privacy protections were implemented. Where are we next? The drop in the stock market since the coronavirus. Of course, you will know, our listeners will know why. They were siphoning out the back door 1.87 trillion, which Kim snatched it all back. But it's now being reported in the mainstream media, and our members will be familiar because it was highlighted again in a recent rerun show. And the drop in the stock market since the virus began has resulted in huge losses for millionaires in the United States. And at the start of the year, there was a record 11 million people in the country with over $1 million in assets, according to a new study published by the research firm Spectrum Group. Another Langley organisation. Spectrum, not Spectrum. However, after the fluctuating losses and gains of the past several weeks, approximately 500,000 people who were on that list are now no longer millionaires. While that number is sure to change from day to day, it seems safe to assume that when all is said and done, there will be a lot fewer millionaires after the pandemic than there were before. Now, whilst there are some ripple effects experienced by the general population, the wealthy are most affected by the stock market crash, and the top 1% of households owned 53.5% of equities and mutual fund shares, according to the data from the Federal Reserve. Now, according to the Bloomberg Billionaire Index, the world's richest 500 people have lost nearly 1.3 trillion since the beginning of the year, and the nation's wealthy certainly lost the most money in the past few months. But they had much more to lose, obviously, and many of them have private bunkers, or at the very least enough resources to get them through this difficult time. But people who live paycheck to paycheck may not have lost as much money in the stock market, but many of them have lost their jobs and fear they won't be able to afford to survive in the coming weeks and months. And to add to that, it was reported this week that 3.3 million Americans filed for unemployment, shattering all previous records. And the Labour Department said in a statement announcing the numbers that was low and expect more. I think there was another unemployment report today. I haven't checked in on it. I've been kind of busy. Millionaires losing their wealth, low billionaires losing their wealth, all as forecast in Clowns in Panic, which we did last year, was it not? Yet again. We'll be back with a rather lengthy intel shortly. Right, here goes. We're gonna this is the intel. There'll be some background pieces, and then we're going to go into the full gist of what is playing out now. A lot will like it, some won't. So who are BlackRock? Linked to the Blackstone Group, and ultimately all the other coded programs like Black Dragon, Blackwater, Black Eagle, Black Sun. Predictably out of New York, and two of the four main executives on whose details I managed to gain research on were born to Jewish parents. Why is that significant? Because it crops up now so many times in so many key positions, it has to be noted as a pattern that is both distinguishing and indicative. BlackRock Solutions was retained by the US Treasury Department in May 2009 to manage the toxic mortgage assets. In other words, to analyse, unwind and price that were all owned, familiar names again, by Bear Stearns, AIG, Freddie Mac, Morgan Stanley and other financial firms that were affected in the 2008 financial crisis. Now, BlackRock, despite its attempts to model itself as a sustainable investor, but one report shows that BlackRock is also the world's largest investor in coal plant developers. Which president has been pushing coal since he got in? And they hold shares worth $11 billion amongst 56 coal plant developers. But another report on them shows that BlackRock owns more oil, gas and thermal coal reserves than any other investor, with a total reserves amounting to 9.5 gigatons of CO2 emissions, or 30% of total energy-related emissions, and that was from 2017. The BlackRock CEO, Lawrence D. Fink, stated that other CEOs should be aware of their impact on society. However, anti-war organisations are not content with Fink's statements because his company is the largest investor also in weapon manufacturers through its iShares US Aerospace and Defence ETF. That is BlackRock. Next item. Oil is currently a big issue and is playing out between the Rothschilds and Black Sun members now. And the reason for highlighting Venezuela recently is the oil coming through there is the Iraqi black market oil. Although not so much now as that got blocked to a point, but also as we forecasted last year, oil is now below $30 a barrel current price about $22 a barrel, which now puts it at below the black market rate. Now this has wrecked the shale market that requires above $50 a barrel to break even, and the heavy crude, which requires between $40 and $50 a barrel to break even as well. And there is an issue with oil that is rapidly arising, that there's such a glut of it currently, and with the reduced sales and use of it, it is said that the world will soon run out of places to store it, and so production will have to be ceased. The cost to produce 1 barrel of oil is $1 a barrel, and BlackRock are part of the black market oil deals. Next item. Wednesday brought up Trump for a TV address said to be on the coronavirus. And yet what we got in essence was an illegal drug address involving, quote, Venezuela again, Colombia, Mexico and other Central American countries, and all of how these things needed to be stopped. Now this show stated in Intel recently of warning Trump that clowns were trying to bring in a stronger strain of the virus, the coronavirus, into America via ports and planes, and we are glad to see he is acting on that. That's why the ships have gone out. As for the rest of the drug trading and going after cartels, it appears from my perspective of faction fighting, in essence, between the two factions of Langley. Langley bought and paid for all illegal drugs, cartels, weaponry and the trading of it, including all the drug and child trafficking tunnels dotted throughout the southwest border, including paying off the Texas Bush Rangers and various other so-called government enforcement groups designed to protect the border, not for the government, but the CIA. And if this country is ever going to be free, elements within Langley and the subsidiaries, plus the NSA and the Silicon Valley, have to be cleaned out in total. This will also help several other countries that are blighted by this parasitic organisation. Next item. There was a big booming earthquake at 10 kilometres again in Idaho this week. And one wonders, was it at Sawtooth National Forest, Idaho, that contains a massive deposit, one of which was the forerunner to obtain assets to take over America by the CIA and other subsidiaries. Fact. That field contains rare earth minerals which they want for time travel, which won't be happening, and gold totaling 4.5 billion metric tons, of which they only believed 4.5 million was required. That site is known as LLC-3. And as for your time travel, that's not happening, no matter who you attempt to coerce into doing so. And you all know who I'm referring to. It's not happening. Next piece, which is fairly long. First of all, before I get into this, a current update. is the stimulus checks being posted out is now being put back to April the 13th at the earliest. I can tell you now, that's not happening. Right. Eerie similarities. We're going to connect an awful lot of dots in this piece, and we're going to explode heads. Between 1963 and 2020, and 2008 and 2020. Now, what was raised on Monday is Q actually in QTEL, which is out of Langley. Bank bailouts, BlackRock, the Treasury, and infighting will be the backbone to this piece. Back in 2008, and unlike what was said earlier in a new piece, the banks were affected by the financial crisis, it was said. And by and large, people accepted that narrative. But that would be a no. The banks, in part, created the financial crisis with their greed-based harvesting system, in part in 2008. And now, 2020, they are solely responsible for any financial crisis, period. Solely responsible. No longer do they have Marduk and the trust to blame, which largely created the 2008 crash. Now it's just them. There is a financial crash. They have harvested everything and created it that way. They have blocked the trust, releasing new money, and money that is owed to every single country. Why? Because they can't control it. And yet the policymakers in this country wish to bail out these people again. Only this time with fresh air policies, fresh air bills, and fresh air hopium. I'll repeat again, there will be no stimulus without the trust. None. People have to understand finances. If you are to create or print new money, you have to have an asset base to support it. They have no assets. None. Zip. Nada. All of the assets were pledged to the trust by them, for them to build their mini empires of control. Only now all the debts are called in, and they have nothing left. And a dwindling money supply, increased again by the removal of 1.89 trillion they siphoned out of the stock market and was subsequently taken off them. That reduced the money supply further. The same siphoning out of the oil markets was or will be swiped also. In 2008, the rogue-based US Treasury Department called in a group to sort out the mess. In 2020, the rogue-based US Treasury Department called in a group to sort out the mess. The company used both times is BlackRock, who are trying to leverage black market oil to finance their takeover of America, and hence the oil price war going on currently. This is what was said in the Treasury Department this week, and it shows their total arrogance, naivety, and also an admittance they are and have lost their control. Quote, "Do you think Kim will pay us out without the 2% fees?" Unquote. That will be a no. Not happening. As Kim would say, I promise you, it's not happening. And it won't. So now we go into the similarities of 1963 and now, when Kennedy spoke of secret societies being repugnant, changing the Fed, changing the currency, and building a space-based group. So back in 1963, JFK was plotting along with Sukarno, both of whom are black son, which may shock some, but we will show the proof of which soon. Remember, Kennedy is one of the 13 American bloodline families of control, and he's also married into the Onassis family, another wealth-based family involved in shipping, of which they received carte blanche contracts and deals to virtually monopolise all shipping lanes. So what was going on then and is replicated now? Well, it involves Trump and Q and the pushing of JFK Jr. still being alive. It matters not whether he is or isn't. JFK Sr.'s burial place is in the shape of a Q, as the story goes. So back in 1963, Kennedy, along with Sukarno, tried to print new currencies via the Green-Hilton Agreement, which was signed off on November the 14th, 1963, with a range of $1 billion US dollar notes. $1 billion notes. That was going to get around the Federal Reserve that was ran by the Rothschilds. And this was an attempt to bypass the Treasury also. I'm now going to post the evidence of that on both the Facebook and the MeWe. Bear with me. On the Facebook, it's gone on the pinned post at the top. MeWe will go in the chat. Where are we? Right. It's now posted on both Facebook and MeWe. The evidence of the Kennedy $1 billion notes. On we go. There was $2 bills that were starting to be issued on a par with the Green-Hilton Agreement, issued via the Treasury and ultimately bypassing the Fed, who were being operated via the Black Eagle Trust that was set out under the Bretton Woods Agreement that was created during World War II. The Black Eagle Trust was all stolen loot out of Germany and Japan after the World War II, and this is known as the Yamashita Gold and the Global Debt Fund, mentioned several times by the World Bank operator Karen Hudis. The Black Eagle Trust, which was run in America, at least by the Bush Group, and they are publicly stated as owning $240 billion in 10-year Treasury notes that all became due on a certain date. That date, September the 12th, 2001. And you don't need a leap of faith to decide who was involved in the previous day's carnage. It wasn't just a 2.3 trillion missing out of the DOD, Mr. Rumsfeld. JFK Jr., who died 2 years earlier, had a magazine called George. He called it that as it was outing who killed his father, George Bush Sr. George Herbert Walker Bush would go on to not only take out Kennedy Sr., but Kennedy Jr. as well, all done with the compliance and the support of the CIA. In 1963, George Herbert Walker Bush was running the CIA, and this is why Kennedy was in hatred of the CIA and secret societies, as they were all run by the head of the Black Dragon, George Herbert Walker Bush, who was more Rothschilds based. They play in both camps. Whilst JFK and Suwano were Black Sun. In 1998, the Black Sun tried to implement a change of control again. I will now post 2 pictures to show you the proof of why they were doing that in 1998. Bear with me. There we go. That's one posted, and here comes the second one. Right, they're on the Facebook page. And now post it to them on the MeWe, and we can carry on. Right, there's the evidence of the 1998 Kennedy deal with Suwano and certain Asian groups of creating new currencies again. Rest assured this will all tie in. That deal and change of control and print new currencies again in 1998, which likely facilitated the death of JFK Jr., which also aided a certain unknown into the public realm and a future Pindar, Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton is a Rothschild and Bill Clinton a Rockefeller. Now, around the same time as the Green-Hilton Agreement, Kennedy signed off with his Russian counterpart to hand over all information of extraterrestrial knowledge and technology between both countries on November the 11th, 1963. This then stripped away the secrecy and security clearance levels down to presidential level, and so was accessible to those wanting to run that program. Kennedy started issuing the new $1 billion notes to fund NASA, which were ran by Black Sun elements like Werner von Braun being one of them. Those are the notes that were shown earlier. Suwarno, out of Indonesia, was backing Kennedy to be the new head of the Black Dragon for North America and replacing Bush. And the new notes that were bypassing the Rothschild-based Federal Reserve. But after his death, they took all of the assets off of Kennedy and Suwarno and carried on their harvesting program. Suwarno was also the head of the group known as Swiss Indo, which is why Neil Keenan was involved in Indonesia. Suwarno and the Kennedy story also. Neil Keenan's family was a friend of the Kennedys, and he often went as a child on the private Kennedy plane. And you may be surprised to know that the name Keenan is a derivative of the name Kennedy, and why both focused on their Irish side. Neil Keenan was in with the IRA. In fact, I was on the call with Neil when the head of the IRA came on the call. I think his name was Dermot, but I'm not 100% sure, who was allegedly somewhere in the Middle East at the time, and this was around 2014. The IRA run many of the mafias. The Kennedys were involved in the mafias and are an enforcement and procurement arm for the Black Sun. So this brings us up to the now, 2020. Yet again, we are seeing the printing of new notes. Yet again, we're taking over the Rothschilds-based Federal Reserve, only this time they're using their own printing group, as most of the rest of the world's printing of currencies was done by the Rothschilds-based De La Rue. I'm now going to produce the evidence of these new notes being printed out of Russia by a company named Goznak, who are also the Black Sun. Bear with me while I post these 4 pictures. Right, that's the MeWe done. Let me just post the 4 on Facebook and we can carry on. This is the last of the evidence. But this is essentially what we're dealing with, as I will lay out shortly. New boss, same as the old boss. Except now, after this show, they're all exposed. See, one more and we're back to the show. So those 4 just posted with pictures of former presidents, including Kennedy's, are being printed out of Russia currently by the Black Sun organization known as Goznak. And essentially what this is, it's the same game. New boss, same as the old boss. And here is your latest new notes. After the Treasury note failed, the new Fed note failed, the SDR note failed, the Treasury dollar note failed, and the digital dollar failed. although they will try that again, but that will also fail. And remember, a note, like a bill, dollar bill, is a debt instrument. Now, for their part, the Rothschilds are trying to implement a new US dollar and then an international dollar bill via the Fed, likely to be digital based. That will fail also, just saying. The whole myth via the internet that John F. Kennedy was doing all that he said for the benefit of the people is a 100% lie. This was a family-based feud which still simmers today between the Kennedys and the Bush family, the Rothschilds and the Black Sun. And this is why Trump, who is a close friend of JFK Jr., was stating to release the files on who killed JFK, as it would bring down that side of the faction that they're opposing. Expose who was involved in the killings of both JFKs and enable the public to create a firestorm against the former controllers of this country, whilst they set in place a new faction of new boss, same as the old boss, with a potentially far worse consequences than staying with the previous psychopaths. That is what's playing out. I appreciate this will not please Q followers or Trumps either, but you have to understand the nature of the beast that we're dealing with here to then grasp what is playing out. Can Trump and Q still prosper? Yes, but not under the Black Sun. But a change of direction is required, and they have to fly straight. Can they do that? Time will tell. Whether that scares you or not, that over time will be seen as fact. Remember the white hats going into Indonesia. Now you know why and who they represent. Those white hats are the Earth Alliance. Put on the internet as Alliance, ending in CE, when it's actually Alliance ending in Z. And subsequently, they are the Black Sun also. Where there are detractors, some of whom are invested in keeping the old programs with a new boss, and some who are just not knowledgeable enough to understand what is playing out. You have to understand now, the only group operating for and by the people is the trust and the team, and we're winning. We'll have more on how we're winning after this break. Despite all they've thrown at us, we're all still alive and kicking. Hi all and welcome back. Regurgitated dog shit for 3 hours, or proof? Facts, right in your face. So they can stick their statements where the Black Sun doesn't shine, or perhaps it does. Rather fitting, really. So, where do we go from here? Well, there'll be more intel and more disclosures in the rest of this show, which may be as impactful as what we just delivered. But I want to say a small piece here. The overall war has already been won. And what you're seeing is mini battles playing out. It's a bit like checkmate. You can still move pieces around the board, but it's still checkmate. And that's what's playing out. And the reason behind that short statement will become clear between now and the end of this show. Right. we're going to go back to Black Rock and Anna von Reitz, who's not best pleased at what Mr. Trump has done. I wonder why. So she wrote this: BlackRock, SmackRock will meet your new brand financial services company, which has been the operative manager of the merger of the Fed, a crime syndicate, with the IMF, another crime syndicate, which now stands in the middle of the middle. BlackRock, like black law, like black water, like black everything, except of course black people, which they generally despise and use and abuse as slaves. It's time to wake up, people, and summon the army of Gideon and rise. That was a quote from Anna von Reitz. So we're going to go into that, what she put there, and it will reveal much of what's playing out now, of what played out in the past, because it always repeats. So who is this Gideon she refers to? Well, this is in the Bible story from chapter 6 of the book of Judges. Whether it's a fake judge or not, from Alaska or not. Gideon is called upon to save the people of Israel by leading them against the Midianites. Hence the term what you put up, the middle of the middle, Midian. In a common theme of apostasy, the people of Israel had done was, quote, what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord gave them into the hand of Midian, unquote. Now the Midianites were capturing any crops produced by the Israelites, giving them grief. And when the people of Israel, and I'm saying that for a reason, because it's got nothing to do with the country, because the country never existed until 1948. When the people of Israel realized the error of their ways and cried out to help from the Lord, a prophet was sent to deliver them as they'd been rescued from Egypt. Enter Gideon. Whilst harvesting wheat and hiding from the Midianites, an angel spoke to him, all very Mormon there, and addressed him as the mighty man of courage. There we go again, the chosen one again. So the angel told Gideon that God is sending him to save Israel from the hand of Midian. Although at first Gideon doubts his abilities to do so, he is heartened that God will be with him in this mission. And the first task he is commanded to fulfill is to destroy the altar of Baal that the Israelites had constructed. The altar of Baal constructed by the Israelites. And this was evidence of what they called apostasy. And so during the night, Gideon and 10 of his men took down the altar of Baal, making the townspeople very angry and asking for the death of the altar destroyer. Joash, the father of Gideon, then tells them if Baal is really a god, he will kill Gideon himself, saving his son. Family feuds again, Cain and Abel, etc. Seeking reassurance from the Lord, Gideon requests proof of God's promise to save Israel using a fleece, the golden fleece. Encouraged by the acts of God, Gideon and his men then travelled near the camp of Midian and prepared for battle. It is clear that God wants the Israelites to realize his divine validity, telling Gideon to lessen his army from thousands to just 300 men to defeat the Midianites. Then Gideon overhears from a dream of one of the Midianites that he is destined to conquer Midian and save the Israelites from oppression. So Gideon commanded his 300 comrades to surround the Midian camp, making it seem the Midianites were greatly outnumbered, then blow their trumpets, the trumpets sounding, on every side and shout for the Lord and for Gideon. And when the Midianites heard the trumpets and saw the torches surrounding their camp, they cried out and fled, and a triumphant victory for Gideon and the Israelites. So that's the story of Gideon. All too familiar of the From Russia with Love series, is it not? The Lord, God, all saving Israel, except it didn't exist until 1948. They were not saving anything. They were conquering humans under the often played script of you are the good guys and they are the bad guys. The Israelites built the altar of Baal, which is another sacrifice centre just like Solomon and the Herod temples. But these people, we are told, or the rest of the world is told, are God and the Lord's so-called chosen people. But does anyone not ask the question, who or what is this God who tolerates and exonerates their heinous behaviours? Nobody asks. The Lord, quote unquote, has done this many, many times on this planet for his alleged chosen ones. He has treated this planet like a giant Civ game. Let's all get them to fight over some fake territory after they declared it holy. But if the Middle East of our planet is so holy and righteous based on the following of religion, why is that whole region being a bloodbath for millennia? Religion, they say, is about peace and love of your fellow man, morals and all things good, we are told. In India, we are told that they are all spiritual based and divine worship of Buddha and all the others. And yet they won't even look after their own people and place them in a caste system. So clearly the books of holiness and spirituality does not make a man or a woman act in the right manner, does it? So one must deduce that religion and current versions of spirituality are a failed enterprise. Now I get that will not please some, but let's look at it rationally of what you believe and what I believe with another example. If you bought a gadget from a store that tells you to do this and it will make you a better person than others, and it didn't work, would you ask for your money back and or discard that gadget? Of course most would, because it didn't do what the marketeers promised. Well, I hate to say this, but the church marketeers are no different. The program doesn't do what it says. And that should be clear to many more people now. But you're wrong, Thomas. It does, they will argue. Okay, then please explain to me why the world is in such a mess with 4.5 billion religious followers. Please explain why your God is telling you to kill followers of other gods. Please explain why God doesn't protect the children of any religion. Fact. Please explain why your Lord is a total dictator, where he says in several parts of the book, if you don't do this or that, I will bring down plagues, pestilence, famine and disease, and I will smiteth you. If the holy book was about morals, peace and loving, where is the evidence of such behaviours in the 4.5 billion people who follow it? Look around you. The world is a steaming pile of mess. Where are all these moral values of religious people correcting it? They're not. And that is the brutal truth and fact, no matter how upsetting this is. The world cannot go on with falsehoods, fake gods, fake histories, fake currencies, fake countries, and religious-based hierarchical and tyrannical systems. We have to get smarter than that. It has cost us so many lives waiting for a religious-based saviour to come and rescue us. He or it or they never came. Because A, they were not who you thought they were, and B, it's all a fake program designed to take you all away from your real God, which is Source, which is not above or external of you, but resides within each and every one of us, awaiting for you to access it. The Lord is not God. The Lord is not Jesus either. The Lord is not alive either. They tell you that in the Bible. It's all in capital letters, which means dead person. The Lord is also below a king in titles. Who was the king? Marduk. After he was given control of this planet by his grandfather, the Lord, better known as Anu, the head of the Draco reptile group, who is also known as the father to Enki and Enlil, and they were called uncle in the clan circles. And why it was so disturbing hearing David Wilcock this week, who is ran by agency clowns, speaking of Trump as the father. The question remains for religious people is, does it make any rational sense of what they speak of? Talking snakes, burning bushes that talk to you, immaculate conceptions, walking on water, parting oceans, a cloud in the sky passing down laws and commandments, the Ark story, God throwing his supposed children out of the house into the wilderness, kissing sandstone walls, praying to a black cube. Does any of this make any rational sense? Go to your psychologist and tell them you've just experienced or did all of the above and see what happens. But that Anna von Reitz short piece confirms the further split within the factions and proof that Nazis, which is National Zionism, NA at the front of National, ZI at the front of Zionism, are not all in one camp. This is what we've been telling you in From Russia with Love. There are Jews and there are Jews. And these dark entities are using the banner of Jewishism to cover their intentions. They've used the Jewish people like pawns. And what she also stated, Anna von writes, is the proof that the Jewish-based camp is not one either. Both her and her cousin Emily Windsor Cragg are following Jewish-based lines based on Gideon. In fact, her cousin Emily Windsor Cragg says she channels Yahweh. Oh dear. Yahweh. And the fact that the Black Rock lead directors are Jewish, including the head person mentioned before, Fink, proves with Anna's piece, A, that Jews don't operate as one body, and B, proves what From Russia with Love has been saying all along: not all Jews are Jews, some are very different. And I will go so far as to say, some are not totally human either. The fact that these factions use the Holy Book to justify their stance is also very telling. It proves that these books was not written for or by us, but a mixture of rogue off-world elements documenting their story as them being our gods. But it's not. It's not our source or creator. And that is why I have no time or interest in supposed holy books or religions. And when the mind control blinkers come off, all will begin to see. And what this also highlights from Anna's piece is the illusion of the good guys narrative. The story highlighted of the defeating of Baal, or the altar, which would be celebrated by many modern day, and so the guys who defeated them are declared as the good guys. But did anything change after that Gideon war? No. And it's exactly the same today as the Rothschilds running the Fed. The QAnons celebrating the Fed changing hands only for it to be replaced by something that's equal or worse, a Black Sun group. It's the same program. The call Kim had with the Rothschilds asking for funding to fight against the Black Sun under the banner of "We are not opposites, we both have a common enemy." It's the same bullshit of "we are the good guys, so help us." But Kim replied, "No, you're not getting it. You are both bad guys, and you were both created that way by Marduk and told to fight each other to keep yourselves occupied, whilst he and they, the Lord, looted the whole planet." Fact. The same happened in the war of 16,500 years ago, when the good guys came in and saved the humans. In stepped the Draco as the saviours. And I don't need to remind you how that turned out. Are you seeing the comparisons? Like what was said in the 100 series, where are the good guys? The answer back, there are none. It applied then and applied now until the Trust, Kim and the team stepped up and gave the people a viable alternative solution that works solely for and by the people. And yet, like the past, by and large the people reject it or ignore it. Well, we're in good company, as previous teachers and revolutionaries operating for the people were rejected as well. And therein lies the problems, and where the problems reside. Us, not them. And it's important that everyone gets behind what we're doing. There is no scam, there's no proof of scam. We're just people operating for and by the people. Not for titles, not for financial gain, just operating for the people. And you know what? Nothing else matters. Hi all and welcome back. This show and host has been accused, and Kim, of being a saviour programme. Now, as we covered in a recent show, there's a difference between the religious-based saviour programme, which means you sit there and do nothing, and wait for the saviour to come back from the dead, or whoever else, to come out of the sky. Our version is not that. Neither of us are particularly religious based. We both believe in source. Our version of saviour is preventing people from being hurt or harmed, as we covered in the show. That teaches you to save you. So you all become saviours of yourselves and others around you. Big difference. And that teaching will go on with the People's Club. Pieces of paper are not the real deal. It will help us to achieve what we want to achieve via the People's Club, but ultimately remember it is a teaching programme. A few bits I want to go into before there's more intel, more exposures. I don't care that people don't like my stance on 5G, chemtrails and religion, because they are my opinions and you can take them or leave them. But our overall show is not defined by those three topics, and neither is it defined by the trust funds either. But if certain people are going to create sticking points on one or two topics, that is not reflective of me, but those who make it an issue. Our show covers probably well over 50 topics, unlike other shows that has one or two or is a niche-based show. So I apologise if I don't cover the ant gestation period in Outer Mongolia or the flora at the bottom of Lake Baikal in Russia, because we cover so much more. And the key for people that are creating these issues is focus on what we agree on. And by all means, if your focus is on 5G, if that is your thing, I'm fine. But don't be challenging me on my opinion to change it. It is, in overall, a complete waste of time and energy. And even more so if you are complaining of 5G from a bloody smartphone. Oops. So the simple solution to ending 5G is don't have a phone. Because if no one had phones, they will stop putting up 5G towers. So the individual, not me, is responsible for removing 5G. But the sheer concept of complaining about 5G when you all have phones from overview is ridiculous. So it is time the 5G fear proponents did the right thing and ditched their phones, and so preventing the spread of the dangers of the 5G. But how many will do that? And again, do people not see therein lies the problem? That people won't sacrifice part of their life or lifestyle for the greater good. And if you're that worried about frequencies, ditch your microwave, because it's 10 times worse. But the clowns in panic told you the real reason behind 5G. Think about it. One of the best things people can do to change their lives is, and it doesn't cost anything, actually saves an awful lot of money, and it's another program that the people all, or many people, play up to, is the Keeping Up with the Fake Joneses program, which is a debt cycle program. Why struggle in a home you cannot afford? What is the point of keeping that so-called status? Just downsize. A house is a home, not a status symbol. And that is another example of how people can change the system and quit their debt harvesting programs. Let the rest of your family and your friends and circle, let them carry on with their fake status and debt cycle game. Because in essence, in real terms, it is they who are downsizing their lives, staying in homes they cannot afford. Not you, if you make that change. And what is wrong with admitting you cannot afford something? It's become almost a social pariah thing. If you can't afford it, you cannot afford it. And new technology has cost most people their lifestyles. Hundreds of dollars for cable, hundreds of dollars for phones and internet. Never mind all the other gadgets, iPad, Pod and all the other stuff. And heaven forbid, Alexa machines. That's where all your money's going. Why are we keeping up with the Joneses? Who are the Joneses? The bank harvesters. And one of our members had a great idea of selling off, and we all do it, heaven forbid I know, because I've made two major moves in the past few years, including a rather long trip, with which I could only carry so much. But we all collect stuff that stays in boxes when we move, bundles of it. Why don't we start selling that off? It's not downsizing. It actually would help you in this financial times of struggle. And all members can contribute to it, and maybe a portion of the sales going to the People's Club. We'll put more in your pocket and a little more into the People's Club, and we'll get rid of some of your clutter. Which then, should you get in that position of being in a home that you cannot afford, would make downsizing so much easier. So they established the social distancing rule, and I want to cover that. The same measurement of when people are buried. Coincidence? I think not. And this is a direct attempt to install more control of the person and also the mind. And it will become a theme and a meme for bot-like people to follow, beyond the virus fear-based period ending. And the reason they're doing this is to stop the clockwise-based energy flow currently going on this planet and being spread amongst the populace, to cut off the connections and send us back into the anti-clockwise flow, which is harvesting the energy. So they set the gaps between us again in a classic divide and conquer program. Even reintroduced the masks because the old ones all failed. It's symbolic and it's in your face. And yet, curiously, those 6-foot gaps are not present in the President's media address or the political rallies to establish the next president, or the military training or other similar clown-type gatherings. It is not applied inside the Treasury, inside the Federal Reserve or the globalist meetings. It only applies to the stupefied public of "I will obey you, master." Well, bollocks to that. And it's a case of do as I tell you, as I'm your new God. Stay at home, lose your income, lose your jobs, lose your businesses whilst we carry on as normal, because it won't affect us. Because we are your new God. Remember the recent Q post of God wins? Which begs the question, which God does it not? So if 6-foot distancing applies, and if that's the criteria set, and they're asking the public to report gatherings, why can't the Republic or the public report all Langley officers, all NSA officers, all IRS officers, all rogue research centre establishments, UN meetings, FEMA meetings and any other clown-based meetings? Or better still, report the CNN, MSNBC, Fox and other portal people. Because they're not observing it. And the question is how many did that? And it's likely none. And yet people will report other people for having gatherings. So who is the real problem here? We are, for complying and non-thinking. Final piece before we have a couple of intel pieces. Is a reminder that THI and the People's Club is the lead role of what happens next. Our focus is not on who is a criminal or who gets arrested, as ultimately that doesn't affect our lives. Our focus is what happens after those mainstream media events. Those events are not for the real alt media people's notification. We already know who, what, when and why. And so that's not our focus. We are think different. The rest of the alt media and the public have a vast archive of information, and they can be directed to our website, thinkdifferent.thepeoplesclub.org. But our focus is what happens after they all find out of what we already know. How will we take things forward, develop a better way, teach the better way, is our main focus of this group. And the reality is, the gist of the mass arrest stuff is so people can tell their own circle, I told you so, and prove they were not nuts after all. And I get that, more than most, being in this position. Was remember, for a long time, I was in your position. But it cannot be our sole focus. Driving beyond that it is. Riddle time. Before some more intel. There are things in the sky you can see, but also can't see. Some things can be viewed, but they are not there to see. Sometimes it can project, and the sky is blue. But is it? As you cannot judge a book by its cover. Not all seen is fact or fiction, science or otherwise. Their charts can appear hollow and yet viewed as fact. One is real and one isn't. Determining which is which will lead to mass panic. People will become sick on the illusion. Is it pervasive or invasive? Is it A.I or A space I, or is it both? But it will evolve into a new panic. Panic equals people are now in control. Next piece. We have spoken in the past about the night and day of Svarog, where our solar system passes through zones of space that can enhance the light in one period of time and enhance the dark in the next period. And this is covered very well by Nikolai Levashov, apart from one thing: the dates. Levashov's dates of the night of Svarog was from 6496, which is 988 AD, to 7504, which ends the night sometime between 1995 and 1996 AD. But this didn't fit into certain timelines, agreements, and also statements made by the former king of the world, Marduk. And so we set about trying to work it out from the period of 16,000 years ago, and now following a statement that was passed to us on March the 21st of, quote, their tenure is over, unquote. This was to do with the dark entities and their playground of the night of Svarog. And during that time, the dark almost has a complete free rein to create as much havoc as possible, and the light has little to no support to fight it off, if they are seduced by it, which many humans did. But during the day of Svarog, it is the time of the light, and things start to develop better for those operating in the light. But remember, we all have aspects of ourselves that is both light and dark. 51% light is enough to be in that bracket, or the dance of the light and against the dark. But also remember, the dark teaches us our greatest lessons if you observe it, not absorb it. Big difference. You have to understand that the dark doesn't go away in the day of the Sfarog, but it has to come into the light to operate and continue their games, and so they get exposed that way. And it becomes easier to see and more difficult for them to operate. And so what they do is they operate under stealth of convincing you they are the light when they are the dark. Which is exactly what is playing out now, is it not, with the Federal Reserve takeover? Because it's the same program, and they are presenting themselves as the saviour, which is perhaps, and may explain, the whole narrative around the year zero time, and the saviour, Jesus, known as JC, or Jesus Christ, when it was actually JC and Julius Caesar. And BC could possibly mean before Caesar. The Draco came in as the saviour in the period of the night of Sfarog time as well. But what if the light played our own game of installing light beings in their night of Sfarog? Could that have been the case 1,000 years ago, when Radomir and Mary Magdalene were around teaching the world a better way? Like the Rus and the Aryans did in the Garden of Eden in India, which worked for a while, but the dark were too pervasive. Again, it fits into the night and day timelines of the Sfarog. So it's said that the night ended in 1996. But what if it was not 1996 and was actually 2020? If you add 24 to 1996, it equals 2020. If you add 24 to 988, it is 1012. So to those who said it was 1,000 years that the Sfarog lasted, that would make it 2012. And why we had the big fuss over that year, as some said it's ascension time, and the others said the world's going to end time, which was also pushed by the Mayans and other tribal cultures of Central America. And yet we have found all of the globe tribes were not only infected with the Kali Ma, but taught wrong history and timelines by the dark forces. But the actual length of the day and night of Sfarog is 1,008 years, not 1,000 years. And so 1,012 plus 1,008 years is 2020. The day of the Sfarog started on the first equinox March the 21st, 2020, which is why the pagan elements who are the dark forces declared their secret martial law on the very same day, which is also a celebration of Ostara, which was later to be Christianized into Easter and the fake Jesus story of dying for 3 days and ascending, which is the 3 days of darkness the alt media are pushing, like David Wilcock. He said it was to start on April the 10th, which just happens to be Good Friday this year. You're seeing the picture now. We're now in the day of the Svarog, where the light prosper, where the light has triumphed over the dark. And it's up to us all to enhance that by lighting up our beacons, but to also be aware of their underhanded intentions of presenting themselves as light when they are not. And it applies on all levels. Hi all, and welcome back to the final portion of tonight's show. I remember in the past people complaining of me always speaking of the hidden war, all things taking place behind the scenes, and asking when is it going to become public. We want to know and want to see what's going on. And I did warn, when it goes public you may not like what you see. I warned back in December things were going public. I warned it would get ugly. I warned news and media would make no sense no matter who is speaking. And the question for you all is, did and has those things now come to pass? I'm not saying that to go, look, I was right. I'm saying that as a confirm that we on this show get a lot of things correct, and for you, the listeners, to have a better trust in what we are saying and also doing here. All those things have now come to pass, and yet some see it as a negative. The last show was a bit negative. The show before was a bit negative. That is your own fear-based thinking mindset, and should not be projected onto me or others. Let it go. We have said consistently with this show, no fear. And we mean it. Worry a bit by all means about certain things, but do not let it consume you. That is no difference to observing and absorbing the dark. Some fear, and some are exhibiting the comparative mindset program of why just you and Kim. Why not? Rothschilds and the Black Sun started off with just a handful, and look what they built. But those saying why you and Kim are not thinking right at all. This is not just me and Kim at all. This is about you all. We've said it virtually every show. All of you. Some use ego of I should be in that position. Fine. Then why didn't you? Because it was open to everyone. But did you step up when called? This job requires many, many skill sets to be in this position, including sacrificing your personal life almost totally, absorbing endless abuse and attacks, seeing and hearing things that would tip most people over the edge, dealing with the frustrations of it all, knowing it's all so much easier it is to walk away than stand up and fight for the people. A majority of which are ignoring you or abusing you on social media, and all for no pay. How many with that level of sacrifice, abuse, and working or being on call to work 24/7 would still want this job? And the key is, and the most positive, not negative, is that at least some did stand up. And at least many of you listening to this heard the call and support what we're doing here. And we thank you all. We have human representatives on a galactic level now, and also at the very highest levels of the control game. They are massive positives for humanity. You are waiting for events. Well, there's two of the biggest ever in recorded history, regardless of who it is. Who it is doesn't matter. What is does. Kim and I are not in it for the glory, the titles, or the money. I think that should be clear by now. No one would tolerate what we do on a day-to-day basis, and all we ask in return is for you to be better versions of yourselves. You to strive to be the change, not wait for it. You to set and chart a new path of what it means to be human. You to develop your own abilities and progress your soul development. For you to care and share more, operate in need, not greed, and above all, think and act different. Is that too much to ask or deliver? Is that an example of us being more important than you? No, it's about elevating you all. And that should be, in anyone's book, a positive. The proof of our work is playing out here and now. Not the future, now. What we have done is force their hand to play in a public arena, when all of this was hidden, and they are exposing each other and themselves on all levels now for all to see. Again, that is a positive, not a negative, and it also means we are nearing the end of the game. Yes, some will fear, and that is based on religious-based programming. The end is nigh. There is no end, only a new beginning. What that new beginning entails is down to you all. Are you going to focus on two people you perceive as being more important than you, which is comparative mindset? Argue over what Thomas does or doesn't do or say, or focus on the main message of THI, which is not defined by pieces of paper, and teach yourselves the new way for the new beginning, and then teach others the same. Because that is what it all boils down to. You. We're going to end the show. I kind of changed the words this week. Perhaps you can sing the new words. We don't need their bot creations. We don't need their thought control. No dark satanics in the classroom. Teacher, leave those kids alone. Hey teacher, leave those kids alone. And the key aspect, all in all, we're just another brick for their fall. All in all, we're just another brick in their fall. We are building our own wall now, not theirs. This has been the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams.